Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, AlbyMTG, and for today's video, we have officially received our first set of data from Core Set 2019 Standard, and so we're going to go ahead and be taking a look at some deck lists that have gone undefeated in a competitive league on Magic the Gathering Online. I chose deck lists that featured new cards from Core Set 2019. Of course, there were some deck lists that managed to 5-0 leagues yesterday as well that did not include some of the new Core Set 2019 cards, but we want to learn about some of the cool Core Set 2019 cards, how they fit into Standard, and how they may be changing the metagame in any possible way. So this is a nice little way for you guys to go ahead and take a look at some competitive deck lists, maybe something that you'll look forward to building this Standard season. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the video right now. So the first deck we have here is Blue-Black Gift. This, of course, is a God Pharaoh's Gift deck focusing on God Pharaoh's Gift. And then because we're not playing white, this is not the refurbished version, so we do have to play Gate to the Afterlife in this list. This, by the way, the gray text up here is the user who successfully 5-0'd yesterday with the list. So Patty Too Cool was the individual here. So just giving some credit where credit is due, of course. But the main card from M19 that slotted perfectly into the Blue-Black Gift deck was the Stitcher Supplier. Just kind of an innocuous 1/1 for 1 uncommon, but it does a lot of work in this deck, or just in this archetype in general. Stitcher Supplier, when it enters the battlefield or dies, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. This is a nice way of filling up your graveyard because, of course, to activate Gate to the Afterlife, you do need 6 or more creatures in your graveyard in order to find the free God Pharaoh's Gift with Gate to the Afterlife. And so this, again, is just essentially another copy of Minister of Inquiries, most likely an even better version of Minister of Inquiries. The big thing that Minister of Inquiries has over Stitcher Supplier is the fact that it has 2 toughness, so it survives Goblin Chain Whirler. But when we go ahead and take a look at the Stitcher Supplier, it's also a death trigger, so we really don't care if this thing dies to Goblin Chain Whirler. It can die, and we'll still be super happy about it because we're just putting another 3 cards into our graveyard, which of course then allows us to use our Gate to the Afterlife well. And then aside from that, we're just playing a bunch of nice little value creatures. Kitesail Freebooter, a card with an ETB effect. Most of these cards have ETB effects. Champion of Wits again. Trophy Mage is a way for us to find our Gate to the Afterlife in this deck. Hostage Shaker, again, a fantastic ETB ability. Ravenous Chupacabra, same thing, fantastic ETB ability. And then only 1 copy of the Scarab God. I personally thought that it would be more, like maybe 2 or 3 copies, but this deck just seems super, super good with the new addition of Stitcher Supplier from M19. Onto the second deck list, we are looking at Mono Black Zombies from Tineful_Rue, who took this again to a 5-0 finish in yesterday's competitive league. And this deck reminds me a lot of the deck from Amonkhet that won the Pro Tour. Again, it was a Mono Black Zombies archetype. And what makes this deck just so powerful is the number of lords that we have right now in this deck. We have Metallic Mimic, which again, this is only one of in the deck, but of course it acts as a lord. Death Baron, a new card from M19 that again acts as a lord, also giving them Death Touch. Lord of the Accursed, a lord that we had previously, and then Liliana's Mastery, which again kind of acts as a lord, and it's an enchantment that gives your zombies +1/+1. So this deck is super, super sweet. You get all the great removal spells from black as well. You have access to Fatal Push, Cast Down, Vraska's Contempt, as well as Never to Return. And then some of the new cards you're seeing here from M19 are Diregraphed Ghoul, which gives you an additional 2-power 1-drop, which allows you to get off to even more aggressive starts with this deck. You have Graveyard Marshal, which is a nice way of, in the late game, removing some creature cards from your graveyard to bring back some additional zombies, create some 2/2s. Also, just being a 3-power creature for only 2 mana is quite strong in the deck. Death Baron, we already talked about how that's from M19 as well. And then, of course, the new Liliana Planeswalker, which cares about the zombies as well. Each one of her abilities here has the word zombie in it somewhere, so it's a very, very nice card. And what I really like about this Mono Black Zombies deck is how resilient it truly is. If we look, there's so much graveyard shenanigans happening with this deck. Cards like Dread Wanderer being able to return from your graveyard to the battlefield, Scrap Heap Scrounger being able to return from your graveyard to the battlefield, Graveyard Marshal essentially turning your cards in your graveyard into 2/2s that enter the battlefield then. So there's just a lot of resiliency in this deck. Even Liliana as well. Her -3 is you may cast zombie cards from your graveyard this turn. So the zombie cards that you end up with in your graveyard, if you end up getting your Liliana, then you can go ahead and bring those back for the turn. It's a fantastic, fantastic deck. I think that this is a nice little budget option as well. Compared to some of the other decks we'll be taking a look at, this is one of the cheaper ones at only 57.25 tickets online right now, and only about $125 in paper right now. So fairly budget for some people. So I think this is a nice way of getting yourself a nice little budget deck while at the same time managing to stay super competitive, because this deck looks like a lot of fun. On to the next deck we have here Grixis Virtuoso Midrange, or as any normal person would call it, Grixis Energy. This is essentially a small energy sub-theme with cards like Whirler Virtuoso and Glintsleeve Siphoner here, but then it also just plays a bunch of fantastic Grixis midrange cards. Cards like removal spells from black and red, such as Magma Spray, Abrade, Harness Lightning, which again goes with sort of the energy theme, and then Vraska's Contempt as well, another fantastic removal spell from black. Blue gets you access to cards like the Scarab God and Champion of Wits, which are two fantastic cards. You even get one Torrential Gearhulk as well, which can allow you to bring back your good removal spells like Vraska's Contempt, or maybe if you're in the late game and you just want to draw some cards, then maybe Supreme Will. It also gives you access to a counter spell. So it's a very strong deck, and then it's featuring 3 copies of the new legendary card, Nicol Bolas the Ravager. There were a lot of people who were kind of suspicious. Would Nicol Bolas actually end up doing anything in Standard? And it seems to slot perfectly into this deck. A common theme that you're going to see throughout a couple of these deck lists is that I really like the inclusion of Nicol Bolas with the Scarab God. Turn 4, you play Nicol Bolas. You're like, can you answer my Nicol Bolas? If they can answer your Nicol Bolas, that's great. Turn 5, you play the Scarab God. Sorry for making it blue there. Turn 5, you play the Scarab God. Can you answer my Scarab God? If they can answer both, good for them. But if they can only answer one, then the Scarab God then gets to take over the game because they had to use the removal spell on Nicol Bolas. And so I really like that combination of Nicol Bolas plus the Scarab God. I think that that's an extremely deadly combination. And overall, this deck just seems quite strong, in my opinion. A nice little Grixis mid-range deck with a small energy sub-theme with Whirler Virtuoso, Glintsleeve Siphoner, and Harness Lightning. Then we have another very cheap budget deck, 44 tickets online, only about $100 here in paper. This is an extremely fast version of a mono red deck, playing 4 copies of the new card, Viashino Pyromancer. It's a 2-mana 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target player or planeswalker. Most of the time, you'll be targeting the player because this deck just wants to kill your opponent super fast. We're running 4 copies of Wizard's Lightning in here because we do have quite a few wizards. We have cards like Gitu Lava Runner, Soulscar Mage is a wizard as well, and I believe the Pyromancer is a wizard. Yeah, Pyromancer is a wizard as well. So getting to play Lightning Bolt essentially in this deck, as well as Shock, as well as Lightning Strike, is a nice way of just running your opponents over as fast as possible. And then, of course, you have the good mono red cards that you had from last Standard season, cards like Bomat Courier, Earthshaker Kenra, and Goblin Chain Whirler to just run your opponent over as fast as possible. And then this list is even playing 3 copies of the Flame of Keld to just refill your hand here. You don't really care about discarding your hand because you're going to have very few cards in it anyway, and then you get to draw 2 cards plus your original draw for turn, so that can give you 3 new burn spells to have once you reach turn 2 of the saga. And then, of course, the third chapter here of the saga is just very deadly with all of your other burn spells. And then in the sideboard, we saw a card that people were kind of excited for, and that is Banefire. The only reason people were excited for Banefire is that it does a better job than Fight with Fire did, which Fight with Fire was essentially there just to kill Lyras and kill Teferis, kill your opponents. But Banefire just does the same job, except in the decks that you're bringing this in against, which is the blue-white control deck, the fact that this can't be countered if X is 5 or more can be very deadly against a control deck like that. And so I think that's some nice little tech that's added in here. We're playing 22 mountains, and aside from that, just a nice little addition here of just random cards from the mono red decks of previous, like Abrade, Chandra Torch of Defiance, those kind of cards. So this is a very fast mono red build that I really like. On to the next one we have here. This is a mono white monument deck. This one I think might be my favorite from the decks that I've selected for this one. I really like this deck. This deck basically revolves around the card Mentor of the Meek, which is a new card from M19. It's a reprint. 3 mana for a 2/2. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. And then it also has access to Oketra's Monument, which makes our white spells cost 1 less to cast, which makes it very easy for us to cast all these cards. And as I said before, with Mentor of the Meek, it cares about creatures with power 2 or less. We'll go ahead and take a quick look here at all these creatures. Knight of Grace, 2 power, works with Mentor of the Meek. Remorseful Cleric, another new card from M19, 2 power, works with Mentor of the Meek. Sun Cleanser, a nice way of just having a main board threat against the energy decks, because the bottom ability says target opponent loses all counters. That player can't get counters for as long as Sun Cleanser remains on the battlefield. So of course this stops the opposing energy decks, which we've already seen. The Grixis Virtuoso deck over here, which I talked a little bit about how energy is important in that archetype. But the Sun Cleanser is just a main board answer to that, less than 2 power or less. Mentor of the Meek we already talked about. If you get multiples, then that's 2 power on that one as well. Militia Bugler, 2 power. You may search, or you may reveal a creature card with power 2 or less. So again, that works there as well. Sunscorched Champion, again, 2 power, and then Angel of Invention, which is just a fantastic card, enters the battlefield with 2 power as well. So this is the kind of card that can win you the game for this deck, while at the same time being a nice synergy with Mentor of the Meek. And the real combo here that I'm sure some of you may already be typing in the comments, Mentor of the Meek says whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, you know what else enters the battlefield with power 2 or less? All of the tokens that we're making off of this Oketra's Monument. This deck seems super cool. I was kind of skeptical at first. I saw that we were playing 25 lands, and I was like, man, 25 lands seems like a lot for a monument deck. But then when I realized how many cards we actually get to draw with Mentor of the Meek in this deck, I was sold. I think that this deck is super synergistic, and I love it. And then, of course, having Dusk to Dawn is a little bit of a sweeper in here. Destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. All your creatures have power 2 or less. You're fine with this Dusk to Dawn again. This deck seems super sweet. I can't wait to give this one a try. And then in the sideboard, just a very reasonable sideboard, as well as a one of the new Ajani Planeswalker here, which works very nicely with the ability here, the -2 to return target creature with converted mana cost 2 or less. That can get you back your Sun Cleanser in the matchup where that's nice. You can get back your Knight of Grace in the matchup where that's nice, or the Remorseful Cleric in the graveyard matchups. And then also just putting +1/+1 counters on some stuff to increase your clock as you beat down your opponent. I think this deck seems super sweet, and I can't wait to give it a try. On to the next one, we have blue-black mid-range, and what I really wanted to point out about this deck is that for a blue-black mid-range deck, it's running 4 copies of Nicol Bolas the Ravager. This essentially is just a blue-black list from last standard season that someone adjusted the mana base for and then threw in 4 Nicol Bolas, and Nicol Bolas apparently just showed just how powerful it is by slotting into this deck perfectly. It's the only red card here, but apparently it was worth making the change to the mana base, making it slightly more awkward just to have access to this card. And again, as I talked about before, turn 4 Nicol Bolas into turn 5 Scarab God is one heck of a deadly combination, and I think that that's kind of going to be the bane of standard for the next ongoing future until Ravnica comes out. We're just going to see turn 4 Nicol Bolas and a turn 5 Scarab God. If you can't answer both of them, then it's unfortunate to be you. And then finally, or I guess not finally, we have 2 more deck lists to look at. This is a white-black Knights list from Paulo the Wall 182. I forgot to mention some of the usernames for some of these other individuals, but of course you can all see them on screen, so you guys know who receives the credit for having the great finishes with these decks. But this is a nice little black-white Knights deck. you get access to some fantastic cards in here, and cards like Valiant Knight is the new addition here to this deck from M19. It's 4 mana for a Lord, but then has the ability to give your Knights double strike. So this card can certainly end games with one activation of that ability. That's really the only new card in here from M19. Aside from that, everything was pretty much just what we had before, with the classic 4 Knight of Grace, 4 Knight of Malice in here. And then in the sideboard, we do see 4 more Remorseful Cleric, so we're seeing this card as, again, another way to hate against your opponent's sideboards, against, for example, the Scarab God. This is an instant speed way of just dealing with whatever they're trying to get back. And then Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants, is a 2-of in this deck as well. Just a nice little way of buffing your creatures and then bringing back some of your smaller creatures as well. And then we do have access to just some other, like, solid knights in the black-white color combination, like Ariel and Banalish Marshall being a knight as well. Alright, sorry about cutting the video there, had to sneeze, didn't want to make you guys listen to that, but we're on to the final deck, and this deck is just super interesting. I'm not sure how this managed to 5-0, but it's basically just like good stuff tribal. It's like this weird mix between a mono red aggro deck and a Grixis mid-range deck, and I'm not sure how, like I said, I'm not sure how this managed to 5-0, because it feels like it wants to do 2 completely different things, but at the same time it just works, apparently. So Clyde the Glide Drexler, well done here. Of course, we're seeing the aggressive start with Soulscar Mage, Karizev, Goblin Chain Whirler, and Pia Nalar here, just the very classic mono-red aggressive kind of strategy to Chandra Torch of Defiance as well. Banefire, we already talked about how important that is. Magma Spray, a Braid. And then even if you want to go ahead and say maybe this is more similar to the red-black aggro deck, where it's also playing Unlicensed Disintegration for removal, and then of course access to the Scrapheap Scrounger's ability to be able to recur this from the graveyard, like you could say it's pretty close to that, but then we're also running the the combination of turn 4 Nicol Bolas into turn 5 Scarab God. Like I've talked about again multiple times in this video, it's just going to be a very deadly combination here in the near future. Nicol Bolas plus the Scarab God in consecutive back-to-back turns. But this deck is just, it's so weird, having the aggressive start of like Soulscar Mage and Karizev, but at the same time playing the Scarab God in this deck. If you told me that at some point someone would manage to 5-0 a league with a red spell and a sorry for making it blue again, but with a red spell as well as a 3 black-blue spell, I would have said that that's probably not going to happen, but here I am standing wrong on the first day of M19 Standard. This Magic the Gathering Online user, Clyde the Glide Drexler, has managed to not only make me happy by getting to see that this deck list actually worked somehow, but at the same time kind of maybe showing us that there is a little bit of brewing potential left in M19, that you can go ahead and play some powerful cards, but then not necessarily just do the standalone thing that most people would expect, and that you can get away with doing things that people wouldn't expect, and you can win some matches because of it. And then in the sideboard here, you're seeing red cards, black cards, and blue cards. It's just a giant mix of everything. It's a super cool deck, and well done to Clyde the Glide Drexler. So really quickly before the video ends, we'll go ahead and talk over the 8 deck lists one more time. Blue-black Gift featuring the new card Stitcher Supplier. Mono-black Zombies featuring new cards like Death Baron and Graveyard Marshal. Grixis Virtuoso Midrange featuring the new Nicol Bolas. Mono red featuring Viashino Pyromancer, the mono white martyred, or not mono white martyr, the mono white monument deck featuring new cards like Mentor of the Meek, Militia Bugler, Sun Cleanser, and Remorseful Cleric. The blue-black mid-range deck, which again, Nicol Bolas being the only splash card here in red for this deck. We're on to white-black here with the Knights, where we're seeing cards like Valiant Knight and Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants, and then on to the blue-black red deck featuring Nicol Bolas the Ravager, along with just a bunch of random mono red cards for some reason. So again, I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you guys learned something new, be sure to let me know down below in the comments which of these decks do you think is the best, and let me know down below in the comments if there's other decks that you think will also see good finishes in Magic the Gathering Online leagues in the near future to come. If we end up seeing enough different decks over the next few days, then I'll certainly make a second one of these. I know you guys really enjoy them when I make these before. When I made it back in Dominaria, the video got like 44,000 views or 45,000 views. It was insane, and it's basically the reason why my channel went from 200 subscribers up to 1,000 subscribers in like less than a week or something like that. It was some crazy fast growth, and I'm super thankful to all of you who have subscribed to me during that time and who have stayed subscribed as I continue to produce more Magic the Gathering content. Like I said, if you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like. Let me know your opinions down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys here tomorrow for yet another Magic the Gathering video.